Hi, I'm Hannah DeSouza, and I'm getting my Master's in Divinity at Harvard Divinity School. I grew up in East London. My father is Caribbean Malaysian and my mother is English, and they have been ministers for 30 plus years. And so I grew up in a Christian home and was very saturated with the teachings of Jesus, and I think that inspired me to want to be a missionary from a young age. So at 15, I started learning Spanish, and then I studied English and Spanish at university. Then I got a master's in Victorian Literature because I was interested in faith and doubt, which were really prominent themes in that period. And then I was offered a job in Boston to work with the Youth and Family Ministry in a congregation there. So I began doing that, and then I moved on to the Young Professionals Ministry and then to Campus Ministry. So I worked in Boston for 4 years, and then I moved to Moldova, where I was part of a team called RevivEE, so Revive Eastern Europe, which was a program to encourage small churches out in Eastern Europe. And so I lived there for a year on the border of Ukraine and Moldova, which was a challenging time because the war began in Ukraine while I was over there. So I lived with many Ukrainian refugees and learned a lot from their faith and their perseverance and resilience. And while I was there, I actually went through a loss, and I reached out to a trusted mentor who I went to get advice from about grief. And actually it was this older mentor that told me about CHORD. And I had been wanting to go to school for theology. I always had a lot of questions and wanted to deep dive into my faith. And I actually went to the open day at Harvard Divinity School for 3 years in a row while I lived in Boston. So I was clearly searching for a program where I could go deeper in my faith. But I didn't think I would have the financial means to do something like that. So it wasn't until I met this mentor who told me about CHORD that I felt very hopeful and excited about pursuing that journey in education. So I applied to Harvard Divinity School while I was in Moldova and was accepted. And so I began my Master's in Divinity in 2022. I chose Harvard Divinity School because it was the most pluralist place to study religion. So I study theology alongside monks and atheists and Muslims and Hindus, which is a wonderful environment actually to study about religion, and has challenged me, convicted me, but also made me grow deeper roots. So my focus is literature and theology. So I'm interested in the role of narrative, and that plays a lot in the podcast that I record with Dave. And I also study liberation theology and the idea of God's focus on the marginalized and the oppressed and what that means for us today. Since I was young, I've always loved stories and storytelling, and I got really intrigued by the idea of the Bible being a story and God choosing the vehicle of a storybook to tell his love and tell his story to his people. As I've studied more, realizing that the Bible is 66 books that have different genres. There's poetry, there's wisdom literature, there's prophecy, letters, law, and I think it's important to know how each genre works in order to get the most out of the book, to get the most out of the story. And that's something I hope my studies can contribute to the church and help the church go deeper into the text and have a better understanding of the book that we're reading and the book that we are a part of. I also desire for the church to know that the Bible is not just a story, but our story, and I'm excited for them to connect to God's story.